This is episode 42 of the Startups Without Borders podcast. Amelie is the co-founder of Factiverse, an AI startup that automates fact-checking and research, which recently raised 1 million euros in investment. Maria, who had to leave her home country of Russia in 2002, became the center of political controversy when she was arrested and denied asylum only a year after being awarded Norwegian of the Year. Her first book, which came out in 2010, led to a huge debate on refugees and contributed to change Norway's immigration law. Since then, she has written 5 books on immigration, freedom of speech, on entrepreneurship, and was awarded Best Startup Journalist for her work on startup ecosystems in the Nordics. Listen to Maria as she tells us how she built Startup Migrant and how she plans to radically transform the migrant startup ecosystem. Hi, Maria. Welcome to the Startups Without Borders podcast. I'm thrilled to see you again.
Hi, it's so nice to see you again, and it feels like it's been ages.
It
really,
feels, yes,
since last time, yeah.
It does feel, the whole pandemic was in the middle. So Maria and I met in Oslo, in Norway, way back in 2018, I think, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've been following each other on social media for a while since we both our projects got started almost at the same time. And then we had a really nice coffee in Oslo. And then the next time we actually met in Jordan during something startup.
Yeah, that's right. Probably the Startup Roadshow, if I recall correctly. Oh my God, it feels like another life pre-pandemic. But it's so good to see you again, Maria. And I'm very excited to share your story with our listeners, with our community of entrepreneurs, because to me, it's one of the most inspiring stories I've ever heard. A fierce woman who went, against everything to have her voice heard, to tell her truth and to tell a truth that needed to be told at the time. I don't want to get ahead of myself and tell your story, but walk our audience a little bit through that journey, leaving Russia, arriving to Norway. You were very young.
Yeah, so I left my home country when I was 12, and it's North Ossetia, which is south in Russia. And my family and we ended up as refugees in first in Finland, and then in Norway. We were political asylum seekers and had absolutely no idea what it means to be a refugee. And we're very surprised and, shocked by the way the system is working and how well prepared you actually need to be in order to make your case and be heard. So we ended up staying for many years without any documents in Norway because we got rejected time after time, and there was absolutely no help from any system or politicians, but there was a lot of help and support from people in Norway. And for some weird magical reason, I managed to get into the university. I applied very openly, stating that I don't have any documents, but I really wanted to study. That was my dream. And I got into the university, and suddenly I spent 5 years. I had a right to be a student, but I didn't have a right, to have a bank account or to just exist or get proper health care. And by the end of this time, I decided, okay, I need to fix this. And then I learned that even if you are one day in the country without any documents, you will be deported and you will be banned from this country and from Schengen, possibly forever. And Norway has very strict rules about that. So my case was basically hopeless. I would lose everything I've had in Norway, all my friends, family, and be banned from the country. So I decided it's all or nothing situation. So I sat down, I spent 1 year and wrote a book about based on my journals about my story as a migrant and refugee in Norway and how much support we got from people here. And that was one of the few stories that that came up during, it was 2010, about refugees. At the time, there were almost no, there's always statistic about refugees, but never actually face. So I put my face on the book and I just completely exposed my story and how vulnerable I was in the situation. And that came as a shock to many people because they were not expecting that you can actually live in Norway without any documents. So it started the whole way of demonstrations and also awareness about people in the similar situation and generally about refugees, especially coming here as minors and being rejected. And in 2011, I guess the case became so popular that I was arrested and deported out of the country. And that led to even more attention in the media, which was insane. It was even attention in the European and American media. And because of that, because of people, standing up for me and for many others in the situation, the government had no choice than to make a compromise. So they created a new law which allowed people in the same situation to come back as long as they had a job offer. And I had a job offer because there was this tech magazine who saw me in the media, who've never met me, who decided, oh, we want to hire her. So they gave me the job offer while I was being arrested. Wow. And that became that changed the whole trajectory of the discussion in the media. I came back. I think it's about 15, 20 other refugees in a similar situation over the following years who are allowed to come back and not being banned from the Schengen. So yeah, I started working in a tech magazine, which was great because I was always been very interested in technology, and I stayed there for 4 years and worked as a journalist, learning the best, the best innovators and how they were creating their technologies. So yeah, that's a very short summary of something that actually is written in my 2 books.
Right. I mean, and you've gone on to publish many more books, continue to get involved in the startup ecosystem, and you founded Startup Migrants. Now, I remember back at the time when we met, you were starting that. Where has that journey taken you?
Yeah, so I think a great startup always starts with a co-founder. And at the time, I met Nikolai Strøm Olsen, who is my co-founder at Startup Migrants, and we both had this idea. He's also written several books on entrepreneurship, and we both had this idea: what is it with migrants and founders in Europe? What are the numbers? What are the statistics? What are the stories? We didn't see any of them, but when we looked more closely into the statistics, we found out, migrants are actually, they're doing lots of new businesses in Europe and they're creating jobs. But the only time we hear about migrant founders is in the American narrative context, about Silicon Valley. So we decided to write a book about that. And in the process, we co-founded Startup Migrants and wrote a book with the same title. So we visited 12 countries, interviewed about 400 people. We went to Jordan, Lebanon. We went to many European countries, to the Nordics, to figure out what are the policymakers doing to enable more migrants to succeed. What are the obstacles for migrants? What are the social entrepreneurs doing in this field? And how good is actually, in which countries do migrants actually succeed and not, and why? So that created a very important foundation of what Startup Migrants is, because we got really deep into the topic. We're still collecting a lot of data on that. We have Google Sheets with all the statistics for each country in Europe. And what we see is, what we found out is that, Sweden is actually one of the countries in Europe that were doing really well when it comes to migrants. And one of the reasons they were doing really well, and their migrants have, high growth businesses, both in B2B and B2C. And what they're doing really well, and they've been doing it for 20 years, is that they have systems in place in their startup scene that not only help founders to succeed, to find investors, but they actually have systems to discover potential founder talent, especially in multicultural communities. Wow. So based on that knowledge, what we and I don't think I've given you enough update on Startup Migrants, because there's so much has been happening.
If you could see my smile, you can actually. I'm like, oh my God.
Yes. So based on that knowledge, we created this model of successful cities that have where migrants do succeed. And it's this, this talent pipeline. There's a place where someone is discovering the talent, someone is helping to match the talent with the relevant advisors, incubators. And then the third step is you have someone who can, really get them to grow, which is, Norwegians are doing really well in the Olympics right now, right? And that's because we have a really good talent pipeline for people who like skiing.
Right.
So we were trying to make some of the same, but for entrepreneurship. And during this process, we discovered that Norway and some countries, some cities in Europe don't have this element, don't have this key player that can discover talents and just send them to like right now, I'm sitting in this at Startup Lab, one of the best accelerators here in Norway. And the distance between them and the multicultural communities with potential kick-ass founders is it's such a huge distance. So we need to close that gap. So that's why we created a concept called Startup Preschool, which is a 3-day crash course in entrepreneurship with and for multicultural founders. So we've been doing this. We started basically during the pandemic, and that's actually when things started to take off for Startup Migrants. So we've done many crash courses like this. It's about 360 people who've been through these programs. So we're beginning to get a really exciting alumni network, and we're tracking and see that many of them actually do start businesses. And some of them are so interested that we started to invest a little bit of both our time and money to help them succeed. So I mean, that's what happened in the past two years. We're really focusing a lot on that direction of doing this.
That's amazing. I mean, I am speechless and so excited to hear this, because it's really the maturity, how mature the migrant startup ecosystem is getting, and how you guys are leading that maturity, which I love absolutely. Since we met in that coffee or in that cafe in Norway, there's a phrase that you said when you told me your story. I remember it was a very emotional day. We're the same age. You were telling me what you were going through, in every step of the way. And I was thinking, where I was at the time. And you said this phrase that just, I could never forget. I took my pain and wore it as a crown, right? And I found that so beautifully inspiring. And I see that, you're going to tell me now if this is the way that you're wearing your story, right? Do you feel the connection to, and sort of like where this journey has led you, right? This is why you had to go through what you had to go through to reach this point, right?
So you have good memory. Thank you for Yeah, I think it's from a song by a Norwegian singer. I'll find it afterwards. But it's I wrote a book about 30 most successful Norwegian founders in tech, and most of them were Norwegians. And after a 50th interview, you're kind of starting to think, okay, they have done some amazing things, but they're just human beings who started. And then I started to realize that some of the qualities that they have that made them successful are the same qualities that you kind of acquire when you are a migrant or refugee. Yeah. And which is it is painful. It is painful to move to a new country. You feel constantly stupid, and you feel like you always like in minus. You always not enough. You always need to do more to learn the language, etc. But this actually builds up your resilience, which is extremely important when you're going to be an entrepreneur. And nobody's talking about that. Like for me, the person who really changed my perspective, or who I guess was one of the first one to say something about, was Julia Hanna. She was Obama's entrepreneurship advisors, and she also started several companies. I think she was from Egypt, migrant from Egypt to US, started several companies in Silicon Valley, and she was actually in 2015, 2018, she was talking about this being a migrant, how it helped her to start. So that's why I think like the role models, people who are out there and speaking about how they turned this migrant experience, which is often have so much negative narrative, to something positive. It's just take that and monetize it.
Right.
Make business, make job out of all the struggle you've gone through, because that's made you who you are. And that's why I also love all the effort you've been doing with Startup Without Borders, because you've taken that, you find those people, and then when I read their stories, I get so inspired, because it's just, we live in a time where it's just, there are not so many spaces where talking about being a migrant is a positive thing. Like every time I get invited to a panel debate and I have to talk about why migrants are not getting jobs and why it's difficult, I'm so tired of it. I want to talk about things. I want to talk about how migrants are creating jobs, and how we can actually, what we can do, what responsibility the society can do to help them to succeed even more, because many of them have this startup gene that is needed to succeed. We need more stories, and we also need more. I think city governments need to take a deep look into their own data and see that they are actually missing out on a lot of potential, a lot of people who can create new jobs, because they see migrants as job seekers, not job creators.
Exactly. It's changing the narrative, and it's also looking at the statistics, because the facts are there, right? We're seeing how the rate of entrepreneurship of migrants is higher than that of locals. So, once they are integrated into the ecosystem, once they're supported, you're going to see flourishing ecosystems like Silicon Valley, as you said. But I wanted to continue with your journey, because, things didn't stop there. And in these 2 years since we didn't meet, it seems that you've managed to create another boom with another startup that also connects to your experience and to your passion for journalism. Now, Factiverse. I want to hear all about it. As a journalist myself, I'm very curious to understand it, because you are using AI, you're using NLP, and you're integrating it for fact-checking and research. How does that work?
Well, again, a great startup starts with a great co-founder. So during the pandemic, when things started to, take off with Startup Migrants, and we got more people on the team and we figure out what we're going to do, I was asked by an investor in Factiverse if I wanted to join the team. And it was really tough, because I do love Startup Migrants, but I also always been dreaming of going and building the really tech scalable startup, because I've never done it. And the co-founder and the original founder of Factiverse, his name is Vinay Sethi. He's an associate professor in machine learning at the university in Stavanger here in Norway. And he basically had this idea about an algorithm that can help journalists to figure out what is fake news online or not. And he studied both in Germany, and he even did his some months of his PhD at the Spotify office, like sitting not far away from the Spotify founder, which is
Wow.
It's very, very funny, and kind of getting really inspired by what he's done.
Mm-hmm.
So when I met Vinay, I was like, yeah, this is a brilliant person who really has the knowledge expertise in the domain expertise in the AI, and I can contribute with the media, and we can be the dream team. So that's how it all started. And it's just, it's so when you work with a typical product, you have to go out there and you have to accept that people are going to have a lot of opinions, and you're going to get a lot of critical feedback, and then you just need to gather it and analyze it. So the first things we've learned is that actually journalists were not so much worried about the fake news aspect, but there's so much content online. Like every day there are about 500 million tweets. In addition to blogs and articles and etc. So for a journalist, when you do a research, it just takes a lot of time to Google things and figure out what is what. And the more digital content there are, the less time we have to go through that.
Yeah.
So we are now building a proper research tool for journalists to help them to figure out both also how credible the sources are, but also just to get an overview quickly over a topic and figure out, okay, what is disputed, what is conflicted, who are the different speakers who are mentioned in different articles, so that you can interview different type of people and get more diversity of sources as well. So we started with like this fake news, etc., and then we figure out, but if we really want to make an impact, we need to actually take a step back from the fake news narrative and focus more on creating a tool that can help people to see the different filter bubbles out there,
Mm-hmm.
and then make decisions themselves on what type of article, what type of content they're going to be producing. Because we're not going to be there and say, okay, you have to figure out, you have to focus on this is true or not, because that's impossible to say. But if we can provide you with both best possible tools to figure out these things on your own, then you make a decision as a journalist. So yeah,
Right.
So now we eight people. We've raised funding. We are in the process of raising a new round now, and things we actually have some pilot customers now, and testing the solution with them, mainly in media, but also some customers in finance as well.
That's amazing. So there's so many questions I have on this, but how do you integrate NLP into this?
So we have one prototype, and I'm happy to share it. It's still work in progress, but we took a lot of manually fact checked data, and then we took AI and NLP, and we kind of trained on it, so that when you do a search in our Factiverse now, you will get, say, if you're searching for a concrete claim, something, for example, about vaccines, then you get a result about what are the most credible sources on this topic, and and then you get an insight in whether this topic is disputed or it's widely supported. And that's where the NLP is happening, because we're not just searching in a certain database over manual fact checks. We're actually searching all over in Google with the trained AI model in mind. So it's making decision on its own.
Right.
And we're constantly working on improving that as well, because what is a claim can also change over time. We've seen with a lot of claims during the COVID time, what is true is constantly changing. So it's quite challenging task, but that's kind of what I've always also wanted to work on, something that has this ability to create a lot of impact and is based on really, really a lot of difficult technology.
Yeah. And I mean, you're in the heart of the storm, as you would say, right? Because fake news and the narrative on fake news itself has been a hot topic, I would say, before the pandemic, with all the rise of right-wing parties, with the election of Trump. There's been so much around, and the growth of social media, of course. so much talk about fake news. If you look at it from a perspective, as a startup that is working on this, you have kind of a bird's eye view on the whole phenomenon. Where do you see it going? Are we walking towards a world where it's going to be more polarized? Or do you think that it's going to become a little bit more transparent?
Yeah, that is a very relevant question. I think people are finally seeing how the content they're seeing is curated by someone else, that it's based on algorithms and it's filter bubbles. So there's definitely a trend that people want to take control over what they read and what they're exposed to. So there is an initiative called Ground News in the US, which I really admire. And there you can see who, if you're reading an article, you can also see who else has written about this from the left to the right side of politics, so that you can yourself as a news consumer understand what type of different headlines there are on the same topic, and then how, who is saying what. So that I think that's because there was, for a time, there was a huge trend in the media with like personalization that we have to, and also in ads, that we have to adjust ads and everything and the content in the news to the person who is reading. But then it is really scary, because then why do you want to read just what you've read before, or do you want to explore new topics and learn something new? So and that's one thing. And then the other thing I see is that Google is great, but it's not enough for someone who is working with more research and for someone who is working as a journalist or a financial analyst. And you need more tools to go deeper into the content and find interesting subjects. So and journalists there, it's just very outdated. They're still dependent only on Google, and they have almost no tools for automated research. So they have to produce more articles, but then they don't have time to do proper research. So that affects also the quality of the content, because you need to produce, and then you just do shallow research in order to satisfy the online media monster.
Exactly. And then you're under fire if there wasn't proper fact checking done. So it's a whole time bomb, ticking bomb.
Yeah, it is really scary, and it's also scary because I think many journalists go into this subject to write great articles, and then when you start producing content that could have been written by an AI robot, and you kind of like, what's the point of this? So let's get the good content journalism back.
Yeah, that's a good call. Maria, I mean, you've been through a journey where there's entrepreneurship, there's activism, there's journalism, there's writing, so many lessons learned, of course. If we look at all these young entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs who want to chase their dreams, who want to leave a mark in the world, who want to find their purpose, especially those who are migrants, those who are refugees, those who are changing country, what would be the main lesson that you learn that you want to share with them?
So many things you learn after a while. Okay, I guess the most important lesson, and I've been asking every entrepreneur this, because I was so focused on, so what are the mistakes you've made as an entrepreneur? And I was thinking, if I learn all of their mistakes, and then when I do my own startup, I'm going to do everything perfectly, and I'm going to nail it. And then at some point, I realized that it's not possible. As an entrepreneur, you will make mistakes. If you're actually moving, if you're actually doing something, you will make mistakes, and that's the point of it. You have to kind of change your mentality as an entrepreneur and accept that you are going to make mistakes. And there's this book about fixed mindset versus growth mindset. So, which I recommend, by Carol Dweck, which is about if you have fixed mindset, if you hate criticism, if you like being a perfectionist and etc., then entrepreneurship will be a bit difficult for you because it's the opposite of it. So I think if you want to become an entrepreneur, it's good to start with yourself. It's good to challenge your own views and make those mistakes, because then you will actually get ahead and figure something out. And the other one is to get a co-founder who you trust and who has different skills than you. Like my co-founder Vinay, he has amazing. He's brilliant in AI field. And my co-founder in Startup Migrants, Nikolai, he's brilliant at collecting data, and also he's really good salesman. Mm-hmm. Which I'm really good at building network. But when we do the sales meeting, I'm not saying anything, because I know that Nikolai is going to do the sale and he's going to convince people. I just need to shut up. So you need people who can be who can have skills that you don't have.
Right. Thank you so much, Maria. You've left me with so much to think about, so much to write down and keep in my notes, so many lessons, and your inspiring story. Thank you so much once again. It was amazing to have you in the podcast, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much, Valentina. If you guys want to reach out, you can check out our website, Startup Migrants and Factiverse. If you're working in AI or NLP field, feel free to reach out. And also, if the Startup Migrants, they're extending to several other countries. So if you want us in your country, I think we're actually testing waters in South America as well. Going to update you a bit more on that, so we can maybe do some collaboration. Yeah, I'm lost struck of everything the team is doing.
That's fabulous.
Expanding.
Yeah. We're just recording this from Argentina today, so that is fabulous to hear. Thank you so much again, Maria.
Thank you so much, and good luck.
Thank you. You too.